Welcome to the Fold Mysteries, where we seek to discover everything that lies between the folds of reality. So, as you can see, Abe is out in the field currently, so lucky that he could still join us. If anybody is interested, we posted a link to the YouTube page of our guest tonight, as well as some links for MMBRT. We have a few Facebook links, we have the conference link, and we have also the MMBRT YouTube link posted. So everybody can easily find those. And Abe, I was just wondering, and before we go into updates, where can people go to buy their tickets? Can they buy them ahead of time? Because I don't think we've ever mentioned that.
Yeah, and sorry if I haven't, but tickets have been on sale for I think March now, so it's been a couple months. And they can go to eventbrite.com and look up Minnesota Conference, Minnesota Bigfoot, MBC, or some of the key words I guess you could try. Also, yeah, would be eventbrite.com. EVENTBRIGHTDOTCOM. Everything's spelled no eventbrite.com. And man, we got quite the show, or I shouldn't say show, but speakers lined up and stuff like that too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'll tell you what we'll do, what I'll do at least is I will go and I will grab that link for those and I will post it on the Fold Mysteries page so people can just
Oh,
click the link
oh,
and
right
go
on. You
straight
know,
to
I
it.
tell you what, after the show, I'll send you the link so you got it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Because that way we can post it on the Fold Mysteries and, kind of help network to get it out
Oh, well,
there.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I don't have anything updates on my end just because my biggest thing right now is just preparing for my trip coming up in just a few days. Like, it's making my palms sweaty just thinking about it because this is the first big trip that I've taken the dogs and the kids on. So it's like a double whammy. So I'm like, I got a rental car that's nice and safe. It'll fit everybody. And we got a really nice Airbnb with a fenced in backyard. So I'm thinking I got all my T's crossed and my I's dotted. So that's that's my update. Until after that trip, I'm not going to be doing much of anything. How
Well,
about
yeah,
you?
I'm glad you got all that going on for you. I mean, it's going to be fun for you, and to go all the way down to the bluegrass state. You're going to be checking out our brother down there, brother in research, Charlie Raymond. It sounds like him what he's got going on with his conference. So, totally happy that you and the kids. And are you talking about your
Well,
graduation?
this is different. This is my graduation. This is
Okay,
Chicago,
okay.
Illinois.
So I
So
know
if
you
anybody
also were
wants to,
talking about going down to Kentucky this weekend.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh,
I don't
that's
know.
right.
I don't know
You
what
had
you're
to
talking
cancel
about.
that. You had to cancel that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know what you're talking about.
Oh my
Um,
God. So, well,
but
I'm sorry that didn't go through for you. But here on my end, I'm actually meeting with a couple of witnesses. Well, I shouldn't say witnesses. A witness. I mean, you can find this on the BFRO website in Cass County back in October of 2023. A mother and son were grouse hunting in October, same weekend as the Minnesota Bigfoot Conference, and they were all grouse hunting in an area that's had a couple of Bigfoot incidences. Well, lo and behold, I tracked them down with some help, and I'm going to be meeting the son and possibly the mom this Saturday in the location just to document what they seen and what they document it all and record that and get that on our YouTube, our Facebook, Instagram, TikTok pages and stuff. So yeah, that's going to be fun. And then later on, just this past Monday, some people were out around the outskirts of Reamer here, and they were riding their side by sides, and they were getting out of this area. And the guy he backed up and bumped into a tree and it made a sound. Then all of a sudden, they heard like five wood knocks from what they goosebumps, five wood knocks from what was being described. So he's going to be coming back up to the area and with his side by side and take me to the location where they heard this, and we're going to have a look around and hopefully we can see something with that. And that's why I am up in Reamer. Not to mention, I also like to do foraging, and I found some morel mushrooms. And this year's been a crappy year, but because of the rain and everything. But I did find some, and they're so dehydrated that, yeah, I mean, these are the black morel mushrooms, good eating and everything. So I'm just kind of letting them rehydrate and soak in that water for a while. And then also, I'm not just out here, foraging. Hello, what is the research you do in the woods? Research. So what I was wanting to do is I got a ghillie suit and I want to go to the location where we've been kind of focusing on these possible formations and just sit in the ghillie suit for a while, for a few hours, and with my camera and my squatch stick and bear spray and just kind of see if anything happens. Just alone in this area, there's the bears are out and they're out in abundant this year. And we're talking with Dr. Meldrum back in 2024, and when he first came out to the MBC, we were talking about uh, Bigfoot per bear ratio, and it's speculated that for every 100 bear, there could be one Bigfoot. So there's a lot of bear in northern Minnesota coming to find out. And if that is, what's the head count? I couldn't even tell you. But based on the different sightings and stuff like that, um, I think the population of Sasquatch may be underestimated, to be honest with you. So, and that's one of the reasons why we're out here. We want to be as close to accuracy and put in research this as possible. So that's one of the things that we've been doing. I've been doing, I guess you say, and having the other guys try to do is get out there with me and be a part of this and see what research is all about. Because it's not just going out in the woods and banging on trees and making sounds. There's a lot more to go into it. And what I'm finding here in Minnesota, that a lot of people are doing just that and calling it research when there's a lot more work to do into it. Like going out into the field every weekend to every other weekend, being consistent and stuff like that, knowing the different areas that you're hitting, or researching and stuff, and there's subtle changes and stuff, because that's what happens sometimes. It's just subtle changes that could or maybe not be related to that. So it's fun, and that's what's been going on with me. There was this show that just happened this past Sunday. My team member Joel Sturgis, he started his show After Hours AM back up, and he had a phenomenal guest on that show. And and this person did a great job. I mean, I was waiting for like one of these because like she dropped the freaking mic on that show. It was awesome. It was awesome. And yes, Gwendolyn, you did an amazing job.
Thank you.
Good. I was really proud. I was just like, oh my gosh, look at her. She's going up. No.
Thank you. I'm not gonna lie, it was a little nerve-wracking because he covered like all bases. Like he went over UAPs, he went over Bigfoot, he went over Dogman, he went over ghosts. And I find it difficult for me to talk about all those aspects at once, just because a lot of people, they're like, well, you've experienced all this crazy stuff, it can't be legit. And I'm like, sometimes I wish it wasn't, like sometimes I wish that I didn't have such crazy life, but at the same time, I don't think I'd have it any other way. But, a lot of people who have heard my ghost experiences, they're like, there's no way. And then they come and they spend a week with me and they start experiencing stuff for themselves. And they're like, okay, we believe you now, because it's a crazy life I live, but I love it.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I am right there with you.
It was a good time. Joel Sturgis, his show is going to be phenomenal. So definitely check it out. I assume it's live every Sunday, maybe?
Yeah. As far as I know, it's going to be like that. So I know he's got somebody coming up this Sunday, and the show is called After Hours AM.
However, you won't be able to find it on YouTube like that. It is the Joel Sturgis Show on YouTube. Just so
that's true.
Aware. Yeah. Yep. I looked, I couldn't find it.
But like on iHeart, on Spreaker, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
After Hours AM, or if you can't find it, as she mentioned, the Joel Sturgis Show.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. exactly. Not to skip back to what we were talking about before my trip, but if anybody wants, I am going to post a link to watch my graduation live. If
Oh,
anybody is
sweet.
interested, it'll be on my personal Facebook page. So obviously, you know where to find me, Gwendolyn Guthrie on Facebook. And so I'm going to post that live. I actually have two different Facebook pages, but it's the one of me standing in front of the tree. That's my active one. Um, so it'll
That would
be
explain a lot. No.
posted. Yeah. Yeah. If I haven't messaged you back on the other one, it's because you're on one that I don't even get on anymore.
Yeah, it makes sense. Here, I'll give this one to Abe. No.
So, but without further ado, as you see, Nathan Bronis just commented, "Good evening," and that is because we have been so grateful to have him back on again this week. He had so much, so much to cover, and it's just a pleasure to have him back on again this week. We've already introduced you, so we're just going to jump right into where we kind of left off. Now, I know we were talking about a lot of, and let me also just say thank you for coming on the show. I don't want to skip over that part. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're happy. I'm just so excited to get back into the conversation because there was so much that was going on last week that we really didn't even get to touch on. So we talked a little bit about this, groundbreaking piece, a groundbreaking device that you have created. So if you want to quickly go over that again, because I think that once you release it to the general public, that's going to be something a lot of people are going to go after.
Yeah, so the systems are called TRUs, Thermal Recording Units. That's what the acronym stands for. They're long-range thermal imaging cameras. So they basically function by way of, they pick up the passive energy that the animals are putting off already, and it triggers with a special software and algorithm to turn on, and automatically it can sort out the subject from the background and the changes and sets off the camera to start recording. So we custom build these and program them ourselves and tune the image to a certain platform within the camera so they talk to each other efficiently, and it picks up. I could pick up an owl flying through the background against just trees, open sky, it doesn't matter, and it would set off at over 300 yards. Yeah, it's quite the system. These systems, they can be made small, they can maybe be made large. Smaller as light as about 16 pounds for the ultralight, and they don't have a terribly long battery life, or as large as 60 pounds, and that'll get you almost 40 days of function. And there's plans in the future to integrate solar, so you could indefinitely run them until you need to do a card swap. But the sky's the limit. And this is not going to just be a thing for Bigfoot research, because that's our primary thing. We built this tool because it didn't exist. And so it's going to change how wildlife research is done in general, because what they had to do before was they'd have to take like 15 trail cameras and pepper an area and kind of hope that that something would set off the camera within, typically 50 to 85 feet away. That was quite typical. Well, this system turns that on its head. You're 300 yards. You're picking up medium, small-sized game crossing through the background and setting off the camera. So that's the other thing. There's no illumination, no illuminator, nothing like that. So there's nothing sensory perception that animals could pick up on. They're shielded from EMF. Most ultrasonics are dampened by this thing. Low frequency is not really a thing. They don't put off any light, no infrared light, no ultraviolet light, no medium bandwidth like visible light to the human eye. So they're totally passive. And we have yet to have one animal detect our system and come up and stare into the camera like many deer and elk do, or bear. We have yet to have that happen. We've had bears sniff them out from us handling them, our scent on them, but animals do not innately know they are there. And it's going to change how wildlife research is done because of your ability to cover so much more area of the pie at a longer distance, and to be able to sort out exactly what is animal in the background versus what's not. Because with a trail camera, you're dependent on an illuminator and you're dependent on the light conditions to pick up a subject, plus the limited range of the PIR sensor. Well, this being thermal, you're not guessing, is that part of the animal? Is it not? No, you know every aspect of the animal in frame. And as an example, I have a little video I can pull up here for you right here. So this is like, I don't know if it'll visibly show up, but that's like
Oh yeah. Oh wow. Oh wow.
Try to get it closer. There, you kind of can see it. But yeah, that's thermal imaging, and it's kind of blown out due to the exposure on my camera. But there's a whole host of, like, here's a cougar coming into frame. You can kind of see that.
That's very clear.
That cat scent marking right there, actually, on the ground. So yeah, thermal imaging, it's drastically different than traditional light-based cameras. So that's a true and what it does.
Sorry, I was muted. So I was actually, so you can tell, so it's not like the red, blue. You've got it set to more of like a gray, black.
Yeah, white hot is our preferred for detail.
Yeah, it's very clear. So it's only like whited out because of your settings on your phone, or is that the way the camera will pick it up?
My camera, it's the exposure rating. Like if you look at my hand, it's all white.
Right.
It's because of how much light is being blown in from this curtain and set up, so that way you guys can kind of see me now. Now it might register better, but yeah, it's there's a lot more detail than what you can see. Like here's a black bear. I don't know if it'll show up.
Oh yeah.
Wow. It's really blowing out again due to the exposure.
Yeah, but there you can kind of see some hair detail and stuff like that.
And it's drastically better than you can see on this camera.
Oh
but
my gosh, yeah.
I don't know. Try to see if it'll do it. Nah, the autofocus and the exposure, but
so much more detail there though.
It really is nuts how much you can actually see with these systems compared to traditional infrared or light-based cameras. And people who want to see the actual clear, clean footage, they can see that on our channel, Study Sasquatch, on YouTube, where we display our wildlife videos, our research videos, all of our stuff like that is available there, and you can see it for yourself. We actually put together compilations of rare animal behavior, that some of which has probably never been filmed, even by trail cameras, because of the fact that the camera is picking up such a long distance scene that you're seeing interplay on things that you wouldn't normally see. Like when you see a deer come in and get all spooked, and you can't, on the trail camera, you just see the deer get spooked and then move off and have no idea what happened. But then you can see the deer get spooked and moving through the frame, and all of a sudden a cougar comes creeping up behind the deer, that kind of thing. Some really unique shots that haven't been documented, let alone on thermal. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So would you say that your research has leaned heavily into IR and devices like that, or what other techniques do you use in your research? What other devices?
So we try to typically stay away from heavy use of night vision, like traditional night vision, what we would call infrared reflective night vision, meaning it pumps out a light that hits an animal like that and then bounces back toward the sensor. Thermal drops off on the lower end of the spectrum, where it's not even picking up visible light. Like it won't see a shadow. Like if I'm walking in a driveway, it won't see a shadow whatsoever, even if there was a perfectly black shadow in front of me. It's seeing the radiation energy emitted on the deeper end of the spectrum, that is heat. That's what heat. It's just turning the invisible spectrum of heat into a visibly understandable image to your eye. So thermal imaging is completely passive. What energy is being picked up by the camera is emitted from the animal. There is no energy going out, hitting the environment and the animal, and then bouncing back to the camera sensor. That's what makes it passive. So we typically stay away from night vision for the most part. We do film with night vision around our camp or our reaction to something, but we're not out there blasting the woods with a 850 nanometer infrared spotlight and then the binoculars, the big NVG traditional military grade binoculars and stuff. We rely pretty heavily instead on thermal imaging. Handhelds, some are phone based, some of them we've custom designed and mount them on vehicles and do night drives. We rely pretty heavily on thermal versus night vision, because thermal, again, isn't putting out an infrared beam, which you may not be able to see, but creatures like Sasquatches, potentially with gigantic night eyes, maybe they can see into that spectrum, and you might as well be standing in that field with a spotlight. And do you think something as intelligent as the Sasquatch is going to hang out if you're blasting the woods with a spotlight? Probably not.
Yeah. So, yeah, I agree with you on that, because me personally, I use a lot of IR in my paranormal investigations and was testing it out to see if it would be suitable in the Bigfoot field. And I tested it out on my own animals. And I noticed, especially with my cats, whenever I clicked the IR on, they would immediately look towards the camera. Like they could pick it up. So, that told me that it's probably not the best type of camera source to use when you're out there in the field, because I think that they are able to see it. So I'm glad you said that.
Well, it's been seen before in the past. So on like BFRO expeditions where they were using NVGs and stuff like that to try to get good images of Sasquatches, they would see a Sasquatch with a thermal imaging device, and it's kind of hunkered down looking around. And this is before many of these devices recorded video. Before that, you had to hot shoe them to the unit to get the signal to an AV plug. And from the AV plug, it had to go out to an external DVR, which had to be run on a small lawnmower battery that you were carrying like a giant fanny pack in front of you. So, no, legitimately, this is an actual case that occurred up at Bumping Lake here in Washington. Bart Catino, I'm sure
I know about that area.
Was famous for that, is where they were carrying around the handheld, which had its own battery system, but it didn't record any video. It was those old Raytheon XP200 units, very low resolution. But they didn't have onboard recording. Most of them back in that early span of 1995 to about 2010 didn't have onboard recording. They were just view only. And only through the hot shoe you could get the signal bust to a DVR and record a very poor version of what you were seeing. And so what they were seeing is that they have a guy running around scoping it out with a handheld thermal, which didn't record, but they could see things like the occasional, if they would see a Sasquatch, they would eyeball it. They'd try to get the night vision guy to come out who had onboard recording. And what they noticed is that the Sasquatches with the could be viewed on the thermal kind of behaving somewhat normally, but then the night visions would flick on that IR and the things would instantly suck in behind the trees, back way off into the timber. And it's time and time again, it seems to indicate that they were able to see that infrared because their response was very different to toward the night vision than it was toward the thermal imaging. So
that's good to know. I mean, that just like solidifies a lot right there.
It's what's interesting is that plays into the whole trail camera avenue too, right?
Yeah.
Think about it in this way, that traditionally people, when you set up a game camera, you're setting it anywhere from 3 to 6 feet off the ground. You're strapping it to a tree at an intersection of game trails. What's walking the game trails? That's typically herbivores. That's your ungulates and your small rodents and things that are eating mostly plant mass. They're not predatory, so they're taking etched in repeated travel pathways. Predators like to get above a trail so they can look down on that game trail. And Sasquatches seem to be mostly predatory or omnivore, but with heavy predatory movement. The way they move is like a predator. And that means that they're probably following around a deer herd and listening for vehicles and all that kind of stuff and stalking up on deer and stuff. And it'd be weird to be watching a deer and all of a sudden, poof, the deer just lights up down below you, below the hill, on the trail. And you're like, that old deer just looked like a spotlight showed up on it.
Right.
That's not normal, and that Sasquatch is going to be real shy about going down to an area like that. And that's just from the light angle. Who knows what these things are putting off EMF wise or ultrasonics, like sound, some kind of sensory perceptible signal. It could be given off. But specifically referencing the infrared, if they can see infrared, it would not be surprising that they could see the infrared flash. And just to parse in on that for a second, trail cameras do not natively emit infrared, meaning they're not putting out infrared beams all the time. That's a common misconception. That's not the case. What's happening with trail cameras is that they have 1 to 3 passive sensors, which are like pseudo resolution, I'll just say pseudo thermal sensors, like what's in the thermal camera. They change their voltage based on when they detect infrared energy, like what's given off by body heat. Again, they're not seeing really light. They're detecting the heat within sunlight or on an animal. And that PIR sensor looks for a disruption, and that changes the voltage, which is steadily flowing through the sensor. And that discrepancy creates a change in like the code or the change internal to the camera. And that change wakes up the camera and tells it to take a video. And that's when the camera turns on the illuminators, which are infrared. And that is what could be visible to the Sasquatch. But totally standby with no subject in front of them, they are not giving off infrared. That's a common misconception that I just wanted to dispel real fast about trail cameras. So, but yeah, there's definitely play in there as to what could be happening about trail cameras and night vision.
Yeah, I do notice a lot of trail cameras that they typically take multiple pictures, so many seconds between, and a lot of times the first picture, the pictures after that, the animal is looking at the camera.
Yep.
And some people say it's because the click within the camera, and I still, like you said, I believe it's the IR. They're seeing that, they're picking up on that, and it brings our attention towards that light source.
Oh, absolutely. There, and I will just affirm that many trail cameras do have an audible. That's the shutter clicking open the gate to let light in, and they do have some of the cheaper ones have an audible shutter, and that certainly could clue some of the animals in. But I've had many animals walk in on infrared and come in and key in on the light before they even, because we've used trail cameras and our thermal cameras in tandem before and done experiments in the past. I have. And they're detecting it before, totally natively, even without any stimuli. I've seen animals pick up, like I've had elk on one game camera pointed at another game camera. Elk came over the hill in front, really close to that one. And visually, before the camera was set off, and I confirmed this with timestamps, eyeballed the camera and was like, that's not normal, and started headbutting it. And then, of course, you got videos of your camera twisting around and doing goofy stuff. So they even key in on them before there's any kind of activation of the camera. Some animals do. And there's actually multiple studies published about how certain rare breeds of tiger are completely avoidant of game cameras. You will not get pictures of them with a game camera, which is wild. Same with, there's actually, I think, 2 paper or studies out, one in the South, and I believe one possibly, I think it was in Canada or Idaho, one of the two, where they found that alpha coyotes or older leaders of the pack coyotes in certain areas are able to know a game camera is there somehow that we don't understand and completely avoid it. Never get a picture of that animal on a game camera. The rest of the young pups and young dogs just running around mindlessly, not paying extra attention, will blunder in front of the camera. But then they'll find that the alpha coyote will just come right up to the border where that camera is and then completely circumvent the camera and go all the way around. Very unusual. And we don't know how they are picking up on it. They're just somehow aware it's there and that it's something abnormal and probably human in origin and avoid it. So we don't know. But there's papers out on this. It's from accredited scientists doing full breakdowns on this stuff. So who's to say Sasquatch don't have the same kind of ability to perceive these kind of things?
Yeah. And I think everything that you're talking about right now is just a real testament to the fact that researching Sasquatch is way more than just even getting out in the field. It's really educating yourself on the types of devices you're using, the effects it has on other species, and everything. So there's so much more that goes into Bigfoot research than just going out into the field and making noise and knocks and everything else. It's so far beyond that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you do a lot of video evidence. You focus a lot of your stuff on video evidence, but you also do a lot of audio evidence as well.
Sure.
So
Yep.
we do have some of that, and I want to jump into that a little earlier than we did last week because we didn't get to cover all of it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about like where your audio evidence has kind of taken you before we start sharing.
Yeah. So what we like to do is that we're very similar to what we're doing with the true systems, where we go out and we put them out passively in the environment where we get a report history and we see a trend of movement, say along this river corridor, this box canyon, or this valley pathway. We try to isolate choke points and then the high points above the choke points that are in places where people just do not want to go. They won't even hunt it because it's so nasty. And we try to get our cameras up in the most passable viewpoint possible to look down through a chute or river corridor or stream pathway or near a spring, something of value, something that is resource driven, or at least a navigation pathway for most predators and large omnivores. And we put the cameras on those, right? But we spread them out over a large surface area. So that way we're covering and picking up things generally in that big chunk of land, but in little places all over it. So that way we're kind of getting a more complete picture of what's going on. And that's with the trues. Well, mirroring what we're doing with the trues, we're also sampling these areas in a very similar way with audio units. So we call them LDRs, long duration recorders. And these are acoustic units that are on a timer function. They're bus powered to a fake supersized battery. So they have a fake little battery that fools the computer in the recorder itself into thinking it's got a normal AAA battery, but then it's wired out to a larger battery pack, so that way it's actually drawing its current from the larger battery pack. And these recorders are set up to run about 10 to 12 hours a night, depending on the season and the dark hours. Shift, obviously, more to winter, you get more dark. Summer, you get more light. And so we play that game. But these record 10 to 12 hours, and we leave them out there in waterproof housings with microphones pointed in certain directions where we can make note of sounds we're hearing in either pathway. Very similar to what David Ellis does, as well as Monongahela and other recordists have actually casually talked and worked around some of their concepts over the years, and they've massively contributed to my understanding with this. But these recorders function on a timer, and they record every night for up to 50 nights. And some of the professional design systems you can actually purchase, such as Wildlife Bioacoustics SM4, SM4 Mini, SM4 Mini 2 or Pro, I believe. These are all also smaller passive recording systems that do exactly the same thing. You program a time, they have a large battery, they turn on, turn off, record a 10-hour night, and they repeat that every single day for that period of time. So the purpose of recording all this audio is that we get a signature or a acoustic map of animal activity, knowns versus when unknowns show up. And for instance, I could look at a 30-day span of time and go, oh, all right, the first 20 days went by and nothing happened. But then boom, 21, 22, 23, we got 3 nights of very unusual percussives, weird vocals, rock clacking, things like that. And then I can see another space of dead time after that, let's say the following last week. And I can, over time, I can pick up patterns on what these animals are doing. And what the normal animals are doing, and I get a print of that. So I know, oh, there's that bear again. Oh, there's 3 deer huffing off in the distance. I can kind of perceive the landscape. I can hear birds alarm calling when something's going to show up in front of the recorder. You just get a signature of what's really happening when you're not there or not interfering with the background.
You
And
could
also,
you could almost see what you're hearing, kind of.
Yeah.
It's set. Yeah, I hear you. Yep.
yeah, and then so over time you can kind of conceptualize patterns when you start seeing, okay, every 15 days weird percussives happen right in this area. We pick them up, but there's nothing in between. That's very unusual. About a 2-week gap, and then it happens again, and then again, and all of a sudden you start seeing a pattern where you're like, okay, it's like every 14 days something makes its rounds back to, here's my recorder. Something every 2 weeks comes by the recorder, hangs out, moves on, and that just keeps repeating. You eventually can kind of key in on when you need to be there or where your equipment needs to be. And so it's about surveying to figure out where your odds are going to be the highest and where you could put a camp or potentially interrupt something coming in back into the area, catch it off guard, and capture it on camera. So that's really what the acoustic survey stuff is for. And then obviously that data set over time will be worth something down the road when we're trying to understand their routines, their habits, where they're going to be. Maybe it's linked to a resource that's coming into that area. Like maybe that cycle stops when the red huckleberry blinks out for the rest of the season. Who knows? There's all kinds of data that we will look back on today in the future and go, those things were connected. There are things here that we didn't even perceive or conceptualize that were important here that can pop up and all of a sudden be important. That kind of think about the significance of these plaster casts, right? From back around like the Freeman film site or the Patterson-Gimlin film site, where we're able to collect that data later, back then before anyone knew what the funky fold in the middle of the foot was for. And then all of a sudden in 1992, a guy named, Meldrum is writing papers on the functionality of primate foot morphology and flexibility and how that's mirrored in what we see in the American Sasquatch track data set, and then compare that even further to China and Russia and see what they're getting and see commonalities. There's data that we are collecting right now with this kind of stuff that's going to go into spreadsheets and into libraries to catalog and try to make sense of what's happening that will be relevant later. Today, it just seems like, no pun intended, background noise, but it's relevant. It will become relevant. And so we are doing the diligence of data collection. And that's what the audio is about and what the video is about.
I just want to fist bump you right now.
That's brilliant. I love it. I love every bit of that. Every bit of that. So we actually have some of your audio recordings, and we shared a little bit last week, but we have more to share for this week. Let me just jump over here. I hate when I share my screens because I'm a tab queen, but here we go. Don't look at the tabs. But you have, I do a lot on my computer. This is my school computer, research computer, podcast computer. It does everything. So, excuse me. I don't think we shared this one last week. So can you tell us a little about this one real quick?
If you would start with the, that's the second response. Try the one on your bottom left below the photograph. Yeah, that one. That one is the first one in the series. So in that clip, that should be, let's see. Yep. So that one, so this audio recording was recorded January 5th, I believe 2019 or 18. I can't remember. It's been a minute. But it was myself, Chris Spencer, and Rebecca Spencer. We were out in an area, one of my research areas, and as we were talking about data collection earlier, I had picked this location looking at congestion in reports on the map. I noticed a cluster, and then within that cluster, I noticed that there was like, hey, it was December, January, February. December, January, and February. There were, all the reports were like in that time frame, in this low old growth stand. And so, it's kind of looking at those kind of trends and going, hey, there's this area has not changed. It's, if anything, gotten more wild. It's along a primary river and stream corridor. It's easy access into some remote wilderness areas from here. It's on the fringe of farm country, very rural. Like you're talking one house every 3 miles, if that, on the border. And then once you go up into the hills where we were kind of on the foothills of, we were right at the step where it starts to climb. Then you're seeing no houses per square mile or per square 10 miles. You're seeing nothing. There's nobody back there. It's vast national forest. So we picked it out using report data trend mapping and obviously season awareness of the seasonal trends. And we went there and boom, we had an interaction. So this clip, it was about around midnight to 1 o'clock. We were out walking around in cold rain, and I initiate this clip by doing several wood knocks. And then about 2 minutes later, you'll hear one of my team members say, and that would be Rebecca, she said, "That tree made a great sound." And the moment she says that, boom, something power knocks right near us within 65 yards of us. And you won't need headphones for this one. So.
That's awesome. So I'll play it right now.
Yep. Okay, so those were my 3 wood knocks. And so you could skip, I think, up to a... Oh, it jumped on its own.
Hold on.
Yeah, you may need to back it up. Sorry, I didn't realize this was the compressed version. Yeah. And that's me.
The tree made a great sound.
Hold on.
All right, keep going.
So yeah, that other one was not me. So
yeah, that was loud. It was distant, but it was still really loud.
It was 65 yards away. When you got one of these things around you, 65 yards don't feel that far, knowing as fast as they can go.
No, you're right about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said there's a... Go ahead.
Yeah. So that interaction was the first, and then there's the second, which was January 5th, the 2nd. Not that one. You might want to go back. The one right next to it.
Oh.
That one. Yep.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
That's me.
Oh, there he goes.
Ah.
The other side of the road.
Wow.
So we got what we think happened is we got between 2 of them is what we think happened. We're pretty sure that they were probably foraging and moving down the landscape to get closer to the agricultural areas, because that's where you're going to have more deciduous trees. There's more fruiting plants. There's tuberous plants. Keep in mind, this is the winter time. So resources have all been squished down low. And so that is what we feel was the motivating factor, just looking at historic reports and what the things were doing, with the directions they were going, the vocalization reports, all that stuff. And that second interaction was, there was a long span of time in between. There was like 7 or 8 minutes where nothing happened or something like that. And so I decided to take, there's a sound, you may recognize it. It's from the Sierra Sounds. It's the, it's, yeah. Yeah, exactly. From the exact series. And that sound is very challenging. It's almost like, you want to fight? Huh? You know, that's kind of the vibe, right? It's at least because it's not lifted tonation, right? You're lifting, like,
Yeah.
That's I'm beckoning to you to get a response from you type of sound. So I just lit off with that, and immediately something grabbed a tree limb and just raked it right off in response.
He said, "Bring it."
He grabbed his baseball bat. Man, that's
and I'll have you
wild.
know, the Sasquatch left first.
Yes. That's awesome.
But yeah, so those 2 clips were recorded like just within a few minutes of each other, and
sweet.
Both of them were instigated. The Knox instigated the first one, which got confused and apparently thought we were the second one. We walked up the road another 140 feet to try to get a better view with our thermals and stuff in the rain. And we were quiet otherwise, pretty much, after the initial shock of what happened. So we went up and we stood there motionless for like 7 minutes. A vehicle eventually came driving down the road and stopped and said, "You guys okay?" And I said, "Yeah, we're fine. Just have a good night. Talk to you later." Basically, you're in the middle of something really important and you need to go.
Yeah, exactly.
So the guy said, "Okay, if everything's cool." Yeah, and the guy left. We waited another few minutes. We heard him go down way past us in his truck and leave. This guy was out night driving with his truck and some hounds and stuff. So who knows what he was doing? I'm not even going to speculate. But yeah, there were several minutes between him showing up and all that stuff. And this came from uphill of us. But then we stood there silently. And then when I did the ha ha ha, we think that the one up there just kind of fell silent up on the hill. Was like, "I don't think that's my buddy. I'm not going to do anything." And then the one down below, we think it got ticked off because we could hear the knock come from uphill, but the break came from downhill. And you got to keep in mind, we're looking down this road with our thermals the whole time. Nothing crossed the road. So there's no way it was the same one crossing the road and going down. So it had to have been a different one because there's a long straightaway here on the road. Long straightaway. And that second one seemingly broke the limb in response. That's the only thing we can come up with.
Yeah,
so,
it's almost like an "all right, buddy," response.
Yeah. It's very ape-like. That's what apes do when you feel the challenge. They puff up and then they grab things and they snap it off and then they look down. They disengage like I'm ignoring you. I won't even acknowledge you. That's kind of their thing. Unless they lock on you and then they charge you and then they show teeth and all that horrible nightmare jazz. But yeah, that's what happened with that 2-clip series there. But that's just an example of like what you can potentially get by really narrowing in on that data, and you can eventually crop that map down to right 5 mile box where they're going to spend most of their time, and you can get on them. It can happen.
Awesome. That's awesome. So I noticed in the first audio clip there was a succession of 3 knocks that you did. Yeah. And I know a lot of people that do the succession of either 2 or 3. And was there any purpose behind that, or did you feel that was the highest possibility for response?
Well, 3 is fairly common. It seems like in situations where humans are present. They're like the Sierra sounds. You hear series of 3, series of 5, and on. So the elevated number, I don't know that there's any kind of association with like, oh, there's 3 people, so there was 3 knocks. I know a lot of people like to go down that road. I've had 3 knocks when it was just me. I've had 1 knock when it was 5 of us. I don't know that there's anything to that. But my 3 knocks are where it's just the first sound is like enough for something to turn and go, wait, did I hear something? The second knock is like, okay, I definitely heard something. And the third is like, okay, that's exactly what I think I heard, and it's not a tree falling, and maybe it's my cousin from way 2 hills over. I'm gonna go see if he's around. You know, so 3 is just like a really easy succession of sound for recognition. The second one for kind of like sorting out identification, and then the third is just another, really drive it home. Okay, that sounded just like that. It wasn't a tree fall. That was something. That was bro being intentional, trying to get in touch with me. So it's kind of the thinking behind doing 3 pretty typically.
That makes sense.
So it's not that we think that there's anything significant to doing 3 other than you have more opportunities to get recognized as an alien sound in the environment, or a pertinent sound, I should say, in the environment.
Yeah, that's true. I'm watching the chat. Carl and Abe are going back and forth. It's making me laugh. So we have more. Let me see if I can get my screen up here because I don't want to miss these again. So I don't remember if we did this one. I don't think we did this one last week.
Okay.
The shoot knock, 14:30
Yeah,
a.m.
so that one is just a really clear example of, again, so we found an area that on this plateau, let's just say it's a big piece of land like shaped like this. And on this thing, we noticed report, going northward, kind of cupping north and west. And there's a big confluence that shoots through there, big chute. And I noticed that chute at certain times of the year was producing a absolutely stupid amount of food. Like you could feed a troop of baboons for a year if you could preserve the food. You could just feed them off of that full time, and they'd have every carbohydrate they could possibly dream of. There was red huckleberry, there was currants, there was salal there was salmonberry, there was raspberry, there was mountain strawberry, there was regular huckleberry, blue huckleberry. Yeah, all the huckleberries were there. Elderberry was there. There was Devil's Club fruiting back there. There was tuberous plants. There's wild apple trees. There's numerous wild cherry trees. There's random small patches of nut trees, such as walnuts, every so often. So this area is just this enormous choke point with a string of reports that lead right to it, and on the other side of the drop over the range, reports stringing off of it. So I said, well, it's obvious. No one's going in there, and they are. So they're going along this chute. And so very first time I placed a recorder out there, I've got some beautiful wood knocks back in there at 1 or 2 a.m. or something. This says 14:30, so that would be 2:30 a.m., the witching hour, the perfect time.
Perfect.
So, and you can play this and you'll hear a very clear example of what is unmistakably a wood chunk about yay big, probably that long, being racked on a tree real loud.
Oh, wow.
That's it.
So what made you? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask, what made you determine that that's kind of what made that sound? Was that? Did you go back and look?
Yeah, so we can look at things on a spectrogram, and a spectrogram is a visual print of sound. And what that does is you can see things like, for instance, you're probably thinking, well, how do you know that's not a distant gunshot? How do you know that's not any other random thing, something falling over? Because when you look in a spectrogram, everything has a very specific signature. So if the passage of time is this direction, and over here the vertical up and down, that would be your hertz. So your ultra low frequency would be like bass, like real low, and then you have ultrasonic, which is like real high, like whistle high frequency. And that goes from 0 to about 20,000 hertz in the audible range for most recorders and what you can see on a spectrograph. And a spectrograph, you can see where the body of the sound is, meaning the fundamental, where the sound's largest generation point is at a certain vibrational frequency. That's because that's what sound is. It's vibrations. You're shaking a bunch of fleshy little strings in your throat that echo up and project out a soft tube and then out your mouth in your face. That's what all sound is. It's the vibration of something emitting out and passing through the air, and our ears are special receptors for that, picking it up and interpreting it to the brain as sound. So spectrographs, you get to see where the fundamentals of the sound are. Kind of like when you ring a piece of like a brass tune fork, that thing in the beginning is going to put off a whole host of sounds. It's going to go, and then you'll hear that lower fundamental will really ring for a long time, real clear compared to the other sounds. Same thing like when you shoot a big shotgun, it's like, there's that lower frequency is the body of the sound. And it's carrying a lot of other frequencies with it, and they distort and change and fade. but based on how something is producing sound, you're gonna see that body of sound really strong in certain frequencies. Like, oh, it's really strong at 340 hertz versus when you look up on the scale, oh, it's 550 is a little bit less dark, a little bit thinner looking, right, on the spectrograph. So spectrographs give you an image of sound, and you can interpret that image to figure out where the body of the sound is, how much of it's distortion, how much of it is wind, how much of it is reverberation or bouncing off of a mountainside. And so you ask me, how do I know that's not like a gunshot or something? Because I can look in the print of it on the spectrograph, and I can see where, okay, there's no sonic boom or crack like it's a rifle, you know, where like that crack will register way high, quickly trail off, and then the low frequency will rumble for a long time. Where you can see that that's clearly a piece of wood, or at least something woody, I'll use that term, I guess I can amend it to that, is that the sound is very much in that cuppy, hollow, ringy sound, and it's got a middle bandwidth, and it's a very even signature, meaning it's got a very strong middle band that's all pretty uniformly dark for the first eighth of a second. It's showing that print, that there's no overriding initial crack of like a rifle. Right. Now, handguns can get a little bit closer to like a wood knock, like a 9mm 38 special, smaller caliber handguns, and even 22 rifles and things like that, lower feet per second, and obviously the larger chamber to how much pressure. It's going to produce below the speed of sound, or at least reducing the speed of the sound to leave that crack. And being that there was no crack, and it didn't have that rumble that you hear tip out real quick when you listen to like a handgun fire, we can pretty easily remove handgun and rifle from that list. I suppose you could get closer with like a firecracker, a large mini 80 M80 style firecracker. I guess you could say that it could be closer to that, but it would be very unlikely that someone would light one and light it at the top of this one road access where I never recorded a car coming in and out at 2:30, lit off exactly one down in this remote chute where nobody is going, and the recorder never picked up vehicle traffic going in and out.
Right. Yeah.
So
that's very true.
And that's another value of the long-term recording, is we can monitor, like, hey, no one's been in here in 6 days. No vehicles, nobody pedaling cranking a bike, nobody walking and talking to their little dog or whatever, like nothing like that. And so we can pretty clearly say, okay, well, there was no one up here, and this anomalous sound is not just a tree falling, and it doesn't appear to be a firearm, and it doesn't appear to be anything else, and it happens to be where all the weird Bigfoot stuff is being reported from, and it's not happening in other areas. That's the other thing. We've done control recording in other areas where there are no reports, and we don't get these kind of sounds.
Right.
So,
it's a process of elimination of what it's not, and then that leaves you with what's left and
the probability. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And we can't ever say 100% that, a Sasquatch did a wood knock. What we can say is that there was a very deliberate percussive, and your bandwidth of options is, it's a very diluted, isolated human who crept in to do one knock and then exited over a 30-day period, or it was a Sasquatch, potentially. Like, you're left with a very narrow selection of what is generating that type of sound.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah, that kind of like leads me into a question I wanted to ask you about your LDR audio. I mean, as far as like how you analyze that, I mean, you just said spectrogram, but then do you load your spectrogram and then you just look for these spikes and audio, or do you actually sit down and listen to all 10 hours of the audio?
No, we do not listen to all 10 hours of audio. So there's a difference between what is called a waveform graph, which is where it's a line and then someone breaks a stick or something, and then there's a little jump in the line and then it goes back to level and it repeats. and then you hear a howl, and there might be a little wave, and then it goes down. That's a line sound graph. That is not a spectrogram. A spectrogram is visualizing the sound in its entirety, meaning there's a background sound, almost like you're looking through a transparent space. Think of it that way. And that the sound is represented based on its entire print and form. So something will come up, for instance, like an owl will be in the spectrogram. It won't just be a line that jumps up like when the owl makes a noise. It'll be exactly, yeah, correct. So as you can see on this image here, that spectrogram, there is a body of some kind of vocalization or primary sound in the beginning, right there at the low frequency, right near the bottom. And you move up, you see another fundamental shift right maybe just an eighth of an inch above that. And there's about 3 additional forms up. Those are different waves within the form of where the body of the voice or sound or the most frequency is being produced. And then your horizontal view is the passage of time going from the left to the right. So that's what a spectrograph represents. You can see the same thing like in a barred owl call. It'll look very much like a very specific shape. It'll have a line in the low, so woo, 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 woo. It'll have like a W shape with a lower tail, and it'll go up, and there'll be little square blocks where the voice's body, like I have a body to my voice. Like if I go E, you can hear the band in my voice where my voice is not super low, but not super high. Like that, you can tell where that body is, and that body is represented as a patch of darkness throughout the passage of time at that frequency level. So
yeah, I want to agree with Erwin Curtis here. That was a really good owl impression. That was spot on. That was good.
I can do a lot better than that. I can do a lot better.
That was pretty good for keeping it very low sound.
Oh yeah, it's funny. And that's the other misconception. The other cool part about doing these kind of long-term recording stints like this with the LDRs is you get to know every sound of every animal in that environment. Every sound of every animal in that environment. Like you'll hear the owl, like the woo 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 woo. You'll hear that.
So good.
And then you'll even hear young owls, like in the nest, where they'll try to do that, and they'll goof it up. And you can tell the differences between juveniles and adults. And there's a lot of people in this subject with a very low experience bandwidth on recording and wildlife noises who would hear that, the juvenile owl, and say, I heard samurai chatter and there were Sasquatches around me. They were in the trees. No, they weren't. You're dealing with owls, young owls. And owls don't always obey that pattern. They have eccentricities and favoritisms to certain frequencies every once in a while. I've heard goofy owls break up their calls where they'll do the who cooks for you, the woo 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 woo, but they'll do the woo 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 woo, and they'll just do it that way. They're not all the same. Animals have a little flexibility in their calls. They do.
Yeah, that is awesome. That's awesome. So I want to make sure, because I think we cover all these now, but let me know. We'll throw the image back up here. I want to make sure that we covered everything. Let me know if you see any ones, because I think we did the ground yellers. That was really good.
Yeah, I think
you got the thrash and groan.
Here, hover over the one on the far right at the bottom.
August 29th, 2020, vocal original.
Okay, so so we've played all of these.
Yeah.
If you want to play that one right before the end one more time, that one should be just open that one up.
Okay.
And that one is really clear. So this is not an owl, this is not a coyote, it's not a wolf, it's not a human. And it's almost singing. We played it last time, but just for the viewers, I just figure it'd be worth playing.
Yeah.
This is where studying the sound really matters, and we've picked up this voice for years. And I personally, this individual, his voice is so unique, it seems like, from some of the others. I had an interaction with this individual in 2015, 35 feet behind my tent. Came right up to camp, was full on samurai chatter, whatever you want to call it, the language type sounds, howling, screaming, to the point that I could hear it was going hoarse in its voice. It was yelling for 10 minutes. 10 minutes of screaming. And that's the other thing. There was emotional vacillation. It would go from severely rage to severe disappointment.
Wow.
Kind of like how you can hear the difference between somebody like, why would you do this to me? And then go down to, it's all I had left and you took this from me. You could hear that vacillation in actual emotion. And you can hear it in primates. So it's not I'm not anthropomorphizing to an unrealistic extent with this concept. But something legitimately is vacillating between rage and just very heavy disappointment, frustration, and emotionally vacillating back and forth between these two emotions. And this voice, and I mean specifically this voice, we've recorded him a number of times.
Wow.
And so if you want to play the recording now, you'll get to hear that tonality. So.
Gosh, that's actually beautiful.
It is
Like-
beautiful.
And that was looped, just so the audience knows. That's looped 3 times. But you can hear that that exact tonality I'm talking about. Ooh,
Yeah. Wow.
Like that long, songy, brassy, floaty upper register, through a lowered larynx. Oh, like you can hear it.
It's
and
almost
that's where
like,
you can,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like
You know-
singing or weeping.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that, but I was going to wonder, or maybe even suggest, letting a couple, Native Americans listen to that and see if there's any kind of a song that has that tone
We
and
have.
that pitch going up
We
and
have.
down. Yeah, really.
We've done that. Yeah.
We're so
and
here.
and interestingly, we were told by 2 separate Native American folks out here that that means "come here" in their language.
No way.
That's what we're told.
That's so
I've not
cool.
verified this, but and these people do not know each other, but they were of Northwestern tribal descent out here.
Yeah.
And they reached out to us and said, hey, I couldn't help but notice this means "come here"
Wow.
in our language.
That's
It's
amazing.
drug out, but that's what it means. So I'm not going to project too much of, again, anthropomorphize, take the human element and cram that expectation and perception on animals or creatures. But it is something to pay attention to and definitely put in our back brain filing cabinet and close it.
Yep.
Just keep it there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is
Carl said that was him stepping on a Lego in the woods.
I was gonna watch his feet, man.
yeah, man, you're a brave person to be out there barefoot. I mean, I won't even do that.
No. Me either. Man, that's probably my favorite recording. But that's not all you have. I mean, you have like this plethora of recordings. That's just what you kind of brought for last week's show. We didn't get to cover it all, so we're grateful you got to come back and cover it this week. But I'm just kind of curious. Do you think that, in your opinion, do you think that Deep Woods is kind of the place you have to go to get to experience or see a Sasquatch? And second, part 2 of that question is, what are your thoughts about like the populated areas that claim they've had Bigfoot sightings?
I will say you do not absolutely need like national forest, completely untouched areas. They will inhabit green belts and forested areas that, if it's dense and there's a wildlife refuge nearby and very low human access, you could have them coming through. Do I think that they stay in those areas full time? No, I think it's more territorial assessment, males moving through. And it's funny because you'll actually notice in these areas that are a little more scant habitat, where they yield high food, but they don't have as much cover, right? They're edge of agriculture. You'll notice when you go in and look at the reports, the majority will be road crossings and there'll be large, seemingly adult males. Very rarely in these kind of areas will it be females and offspring. And if you do get females and offspring in a report, you need to pay special attention to that area, I think. There's a reason they're there. They wouldn't be there if there wasn't a security point nearby. They're not. The males can kind of wander, right? They're brute force. Nothing can take them on. Nothing can bother them. There's no security factor that he has to worry about. There are places that I will go solo as a man that I know my wife and child would never go solo, right? And so these males seem to, like I said, at least what the data preliminarily shows is this circuiting. Kind of like the husband you hear a bump in the night and you wake your husband up, wake up, there's something in the yard. And he has to go get the flashlight and then the firearm and go look around and do the whole property sweep, right? These males are doing that not obviously for just the security factor. Of course, they're looking to where, okay, yeah, I can put her and the kid over here in August. No one's going to be in there. There's tons of huckleberries. They're going to come in by August. Perfect. Got a place to go. Go over here in September because the salmon are coming up this pathway. The wildlife officials are really cool. They're dumping all those salmon in that creek. Perfect. We can hit that area and then go to that area. Cool. The next 6 months are planned out. We know where to be, what resource, and why. Because that's how if you look at gorillas, they know where the troop needs to be at what time. But even in a drought condition, the males, once they're so aware of that territory, they don't even need to circuit necessarily through these large sections to know, seems kind of dry. The berries aren't going to be ripe right now. I guess we're going to camp out in this spot for a little longer. Then when it gets a little later in the season and I know they're fully ripe, we'll drop into that valley. And they'll just make that constant adjustment on their own. You'll see that with gorillas. You'll see it with chimps, bonobos, orangutans. And these things, and look at nomadic peoples from several hundred years ago. Same thing. The males would band up in male hunting parties. Females and women, children would centralize on a village or an outpost. And the males would go off and hunt and survey the valley, find out if the bison were actually coming through that valley pathway, then complete their circuit, come back and be like, oh yeah, we're good for the next 3 weeks. If we get in there, the bison are there so we can have our spears and be ready, right? It's the same thing. These Sasquatch seem, at least according to the data, they circuit and the males are taking stock of the resources and when and where those resources are going to be. And so the males are going through these green belts looking for drive-by places to feed the kids, pit stop on the road trip, if you will, and provide as they're getting to some other security point location and where he can deposit the females and the offspring. And in that journey that they seem to make every couple weeks, there's road crossings. And it's always the adult males in these kind of areas, which is very interesting. That's very telling. And that behavior is very stark to how indifferent compared to how they behave up in the high country. You ever notice that in a report? It crossed the road and it didn't even care like I was there. It just was like, all right, whatever, dude. And then it kept going. But then a hunter sees one at 3,500 feet in early July, high buck hunt season or whatever. And that Sasquatch from across the valley is terrified. And it puts itself behind a tree. It cares a lot now that the guy can see it, right? Why is that? Why is there such a contrast between the road crossing indifference and the, oh crap, that guy sees me. Where do I go? I got to get out of here, hide, obscure my body, and that is because if we think about this from the perspective I just mentioned, you're in their bedroom. that's their most insecure position, is up there in that high country, that area where the hunter happened upon it. You would be the most vulnerable and insecure too if you were at your bedroom and someone caught you getting dressed or doing whatever, right? That's a high security point. Hey, you're close to where I sleep, and that's a real problem for me and my family. So I'm on high alert and I'm actually concerned. Whereas if this male's like, I'm going to be like 9 miles away in the next 2 hours, whatever, dude, and just not care crossing the road, that's where the indifference comes from.
Yeah. That's interesting. I guess I hadn't really considered that aspect, but you're right. It does tend to be those larger males that have the road crossings. So that's
very rarely is it female and offspring. And where you find those precious reports where you're having people seeing a mom and a baby or whatever, you need to pay extra close attention to that area at that time, because she would not be there with her baby if there wasn't some reason. With the males, who knows? They could just be, they could just be anywhere.
Yeah.
Like me, I just go randomly walk around my stretch of timber just because I can.
I
have no additional things to be concerned about. But if I was carrying around my son, I would have other things to be concerned about. So there's just things in the behavioral aspect and the stealth aspect that really play into that I think people should try to put themselves in the shoes, the very big shoes of the Sasquatch every so often. So
yeah,
things like that.
I think you really have your work cut out for you watching these patterns, because patterns that I'm sure they change periodically.
That's the really cool part about the data, is that there is flux, in that pathway, but that flux is like within 1 or 2 miles, almost always. Well, at least in areas, I'll say this, within areas where you have very large stretches of remote timber with interruptions, as long as the interruption doesn't require a careful pathway based on activity of humans. For instance, if I'm going through a green belt, let's say in Ohio or Indiana, Minnesota, and I'm going through a green belt, but I want to go through that green belt right there in Jeremy's field because that's where I favor to go, and I always want to follow this creek. Problem is Jeremy's out tilling that field and brush hogging right now. That's obviously going to detour me, right? That human influence is going to change how I do and what I do. But out in these large stretches where large, vast highways just run through miles and miles and miles of national forest, and there's no humans around hardly at all, the pattern can actually remain compressed over decades. It can be we have one location where a Sasquatch has been seen by a stop sign 6 times. By this stop sign location, over and over, within 250 yards of this stop sign. 6 times in 9 years.
Wow.
So,
yeah,
the patterns stick. If the environment remains the same and the human traffic is low, the patterns seem to stick.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful part about them, at least in the Northwest.
Yeah, I find that interesting that there are these consistent patterns and there's not a lot of flux to them. So I would find it interesting to know if you found any connection that makes these trails, these pathways that they tend to migrate so precious to them. Is it the water source? Is it the streams, like you said, or is it the food, or is it just the previous generation took them through this way, so they're just following with it?
I would say there's definitely something to that. The last thing you just mentioned, for sure. I think there's 3, if not 4, primary factors. I think factor number 1 is travel corridor, pathway, meaning it's a very easy, inaccessible area to go down and through that has a food platform, shade to get out of the heat, depending on the season, or the ease of movement to get from area A to area B. Obviously, there's that, the travel corridor or path of least resistance. But I modify that term, path of least resistance. I call it the path of least resistance and human vacancy. So if you have a path of least resistance and it's vacant of human activity, there's a very high probability that if a Sasquatch is going to come down anywhere, it's going to be right there. So that's factor one. Factor two is obviously like at least in the Northwest is these multiple options. They like to have they don't ever, like I said, they always have a plan A, B, and C, it feels like. And they don't like to, they're not going to put themselves in the bottom of the box canyon, right? They're not going to wade the creek in the bottom of the box canyon, because if something's at the front, they can't get out. And there's no reports of that. The reports indicate they follow that upper, right where the box canyon's running like this. They're following that ridge top on one side or the other, and usually the side that the humans are not accessible to. So they're following constraints and path of least resistance for them that is absent human activity, but is also resource dense. Resource density is huge. And then obviously in that second combination, the cover. They are not in most situations. There's a few exceptions based because the habitat is so sparse or the resource is so good they have to get to it. Think of it like the Freeman footage pathway, the Walla Walla trackway where they cross soybean fields and stuff like that into the open, but they did so under the cover of night during bad weather. And so they're typically staying in deep, nasty, thick cover. So cover is important, not just the pathway itself, but having their complete form obfuscated from all sides is a really significant thing, at least in their mindset, from what I can tell. And three, proximity to pathways that contain large fish populations, like salmonoids, trout, things like that. Those are really important. Do not ever underestimate that. That is huge. So it's a big deal to get on stream pathways. You remember the old Boggy Creek saying, "He always follows the creeks."
That was the creek. Yep.
Yeah, and that has always been the case. The data has never shifted from that. At least the meaningful data, the data that you can go like, okay, yeah, name the top 10 best trackways ever found. Oh yeah, they're all within a mile of a creek. There's some significance to that, or a resource. So creeks, stream pathways, being able to stay out of heat, that's a big one in association to the stream, I'm assuming. And then 4, as you mentioned, generational pathways. These things, we do see areas that no matter how logged or destroyed they get, if they grew up there, and that Sasquatch particularly grew up in this location and is really familiar, they will prioritize being as close to that as possible on their pathway. We do see that. Even if it's like not great, like you're looking at it and go, 3 miles over there is old growth. Why are you not in the old growth? Because there's something about the pathway that mom and dad grew me up on that I just can't seemingly get away from.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense to stay to a familiar path because there's a lot less risk involved if you're already familiar with it. And there's a lot less, like you said, the men going out ahead and making sure the path is safe and all that. So it makes a lot of sense.
There's an inbuilt to that. And that part of that is inferred in that pattern. That's where I draw some of that idea from. If you look, you'll notice that it's like, well, we take this way because dad's always potentially taken this way and it's been safe. And we know that from our experience growing up that the human traffic generally is low, right? Or whatever the X factor is, pick one. There's something to that, I think. I really, because we've had areas where they balled it out, and we said numerous times, they won't be back here. This area, I mean, it's thick, but it's nothing like it used to be. Whatever's important that was here is definitely not here now. It's all rolled over by bulldozers and logging equipment. But then strangely, it's not like they're staying there as much, but they're still moving through. They're still moving through. It seems like we get them on audio, get those sounds like the one we just played a little bit ago. So that's where the theory is based on, is all that data.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious in your research and the theories that you've developed. What do you think the purpose of any sort of movement or migration is?
So Personally, I don't like the term migration because migration infers a mass gathering of a species to a centralized location to go from one resource heavy area for the beginning of the year to go out to another heavy resource area as a conglomerate for the rest of the year, and then return for that roll into winter or spring or wherever, whenever, whatever the dependencies are in those two situations. That's what migration is rallied around: consolidation, movement, and then allocating a resource and centralizing around it. That's what a migration is. And then that back and forth within that parameter, that is a migration. Now, if you want to say nomadic circuit or pattern, that makes more sense, because nomadic just means they're up and moving with the resource, and they develop a set of familiarity around those resources, and they move with it. So one valley, if it gets completely burned, if it's a similar ecosystem one valley over, they may shift. They're not going to prioritize, they're not going to prioritize staying consolidated to a pathway for hundreds of miles if they can get what they need closer. And that's the difference kind of between nomadic movement and migratory. So the nomadic is, there is within a year, they're moving all throughout that terrain multiple times, just covering a bandwidth of area. Whereas the migration is like, we're over here in the spring, we go through here through the summer, and then we go back to here for the winter, and we get to the spring, and we go back for the summer. And then, yeah, that's the migration difference between nomadicism and migratory patterns. So I would say they're nomadic, because we get reports in our research areas. We'll get them in December, we'll get them in April, we'll get them in July, we'll get them in August, we'll get them in very, very tail end of November, back into December, which is like, well, okay, well, they're obviously not absent to this area for 7 months. They're just spending fewer days in a month in their circuit at this location, because the resource a little bit lower is better to spend more time in for that season. But they're still negotiating that whole pathway. And if you think about it, have you ever been around moose or elk before? Maybe?
No. Nope.
Nope.
Yeah, well, so with, let me compare this to something. So like moose and elk, I'll just use the comparison anyway. When moose get into an area, they cluster. They here's a resource, we're going to chew it down to dirt. Like, that's just what they do. They take all the buds off. They heavily browse that area almost into the ground. They will chew it right down. When a moose is living somewhere, you know it. They are just mowing it down, and that environmental impact is so visible on the landscape. I think part of this circuit is to prevent overbrowsing. I think that they do this on purpose so they can kind of spread out their caloric need and pressure on that environment for two reasons. One, if they just eat the ripe berries right now, just the best ripe ones, they move on for 2 weeks, guess what happens? 2 weeks later, they come back, there's a whole new wave of that same resource now available again, just ripened up over that 2 weeks. Another reason they might do that is to reduce the game animals, the animals that they're going to eat, like the fawns, the calves, the elk, the adult deer, rodents, ground squirrels, whatever, mountain beavers, varmints, critters, weasels, whatever you want to call the group of the animal families that they're feeding on. They don't, like, if I deer hunt in the same deer stand every single day, all the deer in that area are going to be clued in that I'm right there every single day, right? So what are the deer going to do? They're going to adjust their pattern to not be there, right? But if I'm only there 3 to 4 days a month in that location, right, because I'm circuiting, the deer that have stayed there will have no ability to pattern me. And so I will be able to re-enter at a particular time and catch that whole animal group off guard and potentially effectively hunt them. Whereas if I would have stayed camped out there and browsed everything to the ground, left my sign, my scent, my impact, all the deer that would have been comfortable being there are just going to be vacant. Whereas if I give it 2 weeks, they kind of get comfortable again and they come back in and they go back to normal. And then surprise, here's a rock to the forehead, little deer. And then I got lunch. So yeah, part of it is overbrowsing and then not informing the game animals, I think, to their patterns enough that the animals, their browse species, the animals they would be eating, can't pattern them, and so they can take advantage of that lack of information. That's what I think with those two factors. So
Unmute yourself, sweetie.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I couldn't agree more. And, you know, I think it's amazing that you connected those dots. And I just want to apologize to Abe. I feel like I've kind of stole all the opportunities for questions. I've just been so excited to get to talk to you again. So, Abe, do you have any questions?
No,
I don't want to like.
Oh my gosh. You know, I guess what I see a lot of people not knowing how to utilize like data mapping. Can you kind of tell people how for those? And I think we may have covered it just a little bit last week, but can you reiterate on the data mapping and how to go about doing that?
yeah, so for some of you nerds out there like myself, I highly recommend using like GIS platforms. So geographic and topographical layer mapping, so where you can basically see survey data in terrain mode, forest canopy. You can see LiDAR layering. You can see geology of the area where, oh, we got basalt formations over here and we got granite outcroppings over here. You can get all these different layers for these different ecoregions and geological regions with this GIS software. And you can do pin marking for reports. And just what's cool about this is that you get this map and you have these reports right on the map. Well, these different layers can show you where different resources and things are consolidating at different times of the year, or where different formations in the terrain are going to funnel animals or influence behavior, where river pathways are going to have host salmon, where they're not going to host salmon. So plotting these reports on those layers and then incorporating a huge platform of ecological and geological data can really inform you on things. So mapping in that regard. And then as we enter the era of AI will basically be able to act like your cartographer and you know, a wildlife biologist who interprets all this stuff, and you can funnel all that information you've collected, layered and mapped, and say, search these 10 different parameters for commonalities with Sasquatch reports. And it'll condense that information, digest it, and create different like interpretations or hypotheses around that data set. So AI is definitely our friend in consolidating and making sense of data in that sense. If that is something that you're not technologically deep on, AI is your friend in that regard. So I do a lot of my work manually, and I use OnX and a lot of Google Terrain Feature and Google Earth for my mapping. And I color code my reports the traditional way. You know, cold months are blue, green up months are green to dark green, and then the hot is like in the red, orange, and then fall will be brown, and then moving back into cold months will be blue, right? I just have a series of colors that I map out, and then they're pinned on this terrain landscape in my OnX 3D mapping software, which I highly recommend, by the way. I don't care if you use HuntStand, OnX Backcountry, or Gaia GPS, whatever. They all offer kind of the same thing. You can do your data mapping and that kind of thing just in a very light way and get very quick views of like, oh, on this mountainside up here and then this bench and then it goes down to this deep valley. In August, all the reports are up on that bench below the mountaintop, and then into the wintertime, they all go down by the river. You can see that pattern, and then you can flip and zoom in on the map, and you can see the clusters and then where they're following certain river access points, terrain features, or even forest canopy types, or where the water is if you're in a dry region, like say in Colorado. There's all kinds of things like this that these mapping softwares can really help with. I see someone ask what's the best software for Sasquatch data. I would say it's user dependent. They all offer basically the same things. Mm-hmm. So I have a hard time picking any one particularly. I prefer OnX because I am very comfortable with it. It's user friendly. I'm a techie, but I'm not like so deep that the GIS systems I'm super comfortable with on the computer. And what's nice about these app-based functionality systems is I can have it on my phone, I can go to the field, I can make notes, and it transfers to what I have on laptop. So it's hard to say which one's best. I know Gaia and QGIS offers a really good one that you can go to. Those are two great options. Many of them are for free. For the pro mode, you got to pay a little bit, but you get more tools, more layers, more access, more updated information, that kind of thing. So
Very nice.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great information. I actually wrote some of that down as well for myself. We do have another really cool question, which kind of goes into another question I had was types of investigative techniques. So Trail Cam Adventures asked, have you had any success with gifting, and what are your thoughts on this?
So back when I was in Michigan, I had one instance that was really interesting regarding because back then everybody was raving, put out a jar of peanut butter, back in the day. That was around the time the Mike Green footage was captured with a Zagnut bar on a tree stump.
Yep.
So I tried peanut butter, and I put it up in the craw of a tree, and I actually had it there, and I had one on a stump. The one in the craw of the tree completely disappeared. I don't even know. The one on the stump remained. And then one day I came back, the one on the stump was sitting on the stump upright and empty, no lid. And you gotta understand, I put this next to where I had it up in the craw of the tree, the other one up in the craw of the tree, and there was nothing in the craw of the tree, right? Nothing. Like that one just disappeared. The other one was still empty on the stump, lid was gone. The other whole jar was gone. Well, 2 months later, I come back and I picked up the empty jar off the stump, but I look up in the craw of the tree, and there's the empty jar with the lid put back on.
No way.
From the one had disappeared forever ago.
That's
And
pretty
no one
cool.
was back there. It's on private property, and the guy that I was visiting on the property was too old to even get back there. So no one was in there. And I found tracks in there 3 times over the years.
Very interesting. But
But
you don't
I
make a habit of
know-
it, I guess?
No, after that, I just realized, it kind of dawned on me, like, I'm kind of training something, and I don't even know if it's a Sasquatch. I'm training something to come in here, and I go in here a lot. So am I getting an animal addicted to food? Dude, there were just things that I thought about like that. And now I'm not as anti-trying something like that, obviously in a non-illegal way, somehow to do it. I don't know. But there's legalities now on baiting and everything, so I'm kind of like a little careful. I don't think I would do that. But yeah, you could definitely get, and my goal is to get fingerprints. If they're touching the jar with oil on it.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We haven't done a lot of it because of the legalities attached to it, and it can get tricky getting something dependent on food and you're not knowing what it is for a while. So, but if you can bait in your state, unlike Washington, you want to try something. If you feel like you could actually get some kind of evidence to move the needle, I'm not going to be the guy to complain about it, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you did have a good result from it when you did do it. So that is interesting.
Something to touch on. So earlier I was referencing that this area that we're researching is really special. Well, here's something that's interesting, and it relates to primates. The bigger the brain of an organism, the more omega oil and fatty acids they need. The omega-6s and such are needed for fetal development and maintaining a healthy brain for a large-brained animal. And walnut trees are a nut. All nuts are high in these omega fatty acids. You know what else is high in the omega fatty acids? I'll give you a hint. They swim a lot.
Salmon.
Yeah. And so the salmon, how many old stories do we hear from native cultures where these things broke into their smokehouses and stole the salmon?
Yep.
Or pulled in their gill nets. The guy's literally pulling in the net, and all of a sudden something pulls on the net on the other side of the river, and he puts a head flashlight over there, and there's the Sasquatch pulling on the same net going, no, bud, these are mine now. At least these really old stories in historic reference. And so I think there's something really special about these omega fatty acids that it's really important to key in on. And this area that we study and that some other people are studying here in Washington have these groves of these walnut trees on them.
Oh, yeah.
With low human activity near them. And so I wonder if that's not another source when salmonoids are not available of them getting these fatty acids that the demand is there, especially during gestation for rearing young and siring offspring and stuff, and let alone their own supersized brain. So that's something I think people really should start paying attention more to is sources of omega fatty oils in nature. And guess what else is full of omega fatty oils? Peanut butter.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something to it. Don't know. But that's
cool.
my take on dating and all that stuff.
Yeah. So when you're putting the jar out there, Nate, did you poke any holes in it, or did you just leave the jar as it was? Yeah.
I took the seal off.
Yeah.
That, you know, when you take the lid off, there's that silver white seal underneath. I peeled that off and put the lid back on real tight because I didn't want a raccoon undoing it or something. And that's the other thing. The jar wasn't chewed on. There was no chew marks, no bite marks, no nibble marks. Something for sure took the lid off, scraped out that peanut butter jar.
Wow.
Completely clean, and put the lid back on and put it in the craw of the tree.
Wow.
Don't know.
That's very interesting. You have a very interesting question here by Sherry. Would Sasquatch eating brains get the fatty acids it needs to feed the brain?
I guess. I don't know when it metabolizes and gets to the brain, I don't quite know if it's quite in the same rendered state that you could use it as a source for the material. The brain needs the thing. It doesn't necessarily, I don't think, harbor it as the same compound. I think it changes by the time it gets to the brain. That being said, the brain does have a bunch of rare nutrients in it and cholesterol, which cholesterol is actually quite needed for most large-brained animals and creatures. And so that's why some animals do target brains. Like weasels will tear animals open and eat the brains for that reason. But the liver, that's another thing we hear constantly, is where deer are found disemboweled, their legs are broken, the liver's peeled out, and that was the priority. So I think the liver is also another place you could be getting some of these acids and rare nutrients. The liver per pound is the most nutrient dense part of the body in any mammal anyway. So, and bone marrow also, as referenced below, there is some suggested evidence out there that these things may be breaking bones open and scraping out marrow. I've heard a number of stories about that. As a way of getting probably fat and rare compounds that are hard to get elsewhere in nature. So, yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Liver has vitamins A, D, E, and K, and I believe DHA as well. So there's things to that are there. It's many nutrients, and iron, all kinds of proteins. Enzymes are found in the liver that may be very useful to Sasquatch.
Well, especially with vitamin A, from what I've read, is that the vitamin A also helps with their night vision and being able to see better and more well in the dark as well.
Potentially, yeah. And A and E are both really good for keratin, skin, hair, nails, that kind of thing. And going in wintertime, that might be a priority to thicken up a little bit and be able to endure the cold, whereas in the summer they may lose a little here and there.
Great questions from the chat room.
Yeah. I feel like I need to sit down and watch this back, because I have already filled up 2 pages of stuff that I'm writing down. Because I mean, you're just I'm really enjoying this, because you just are a plethora of just really great information when it comes to research and paying attention to other things outside of just being out in the woods. So yeah.
Nathan,
just a lot of great stuff.
What are you finding them to use any kind of tools in gathering? Do you think, rocks? I mean, we know that they're using rocks. They have to use rocks.
Oh yeah.
Primitive man need to use tools. So why it's not too far fetched to say that these two also use tools.
I would say that basic implements are definitely a thing. I've personally taken 3 reports, and I've just become aware of a 4th one that I'm trying to investigate, but I can't get in touch with the witness. They're impossible to find. But of them being seen using sticks modified that are stout and thick and bored off at the edge to dig holes or troughs near roots, almost like scraping the root to get some kind of sap to be extruded and excreted. And so implements being used, very, very, very just basic blunt implements for scraping or gouging or shivving something open. Rocks for sure. The fawn that the one dumped out on the ground when it left and did the big U-turn back into the willows, that thing, that the head of that fawn, there is no other way you could exert that much force and split the hide on the skull and cave the whole skull in concave like that, from being structured like that to indented and then all floppy. You could when I pushed on the skull physically gave way into a
wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was definitely killed with blunt force trauma with an extremely hard surfaced object that actually split the skin like a laceration, and that was visible on that fawn. So I'm very well convinced that they used very basic implements. And rock clacking is kind of another thing that kind of shows up that shows they're using 2 objects to do a specific thing. That's a tool of form. It's using 2 things to achieve some kind of mechanical end, in the sense like it's producing a sound, which means something or is significant. So,
yeah.
I've never heard of them making arrowheads. I've never heard of them making spears or anything like that. Just the very basic push, pull, and scrape implements. That's it. Not much outside of that. So.
Yeah, for anybody who's interested on the what he's talking about with the deer with the concave skull, go back and listen to last week's episode with Nathan. It's a really, really, really amazing story. So his first experience was something quite terrifying and exciting all at once. So go back and listen to that if you're not familiar with it. I myself have personally heard rock clacks very clearly only recently, where I was like, that was definitely rock clacks. And it was so weird because it sounded very much like Morse code. It was like a clack, 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 clack. It was very interesting. It was like, it was right when I got to the top of this hill and I ran into this very strong urine smell. And
you see, that's interesting. That is interesting, because that smell that you're describing. It smells like a very stagnant urine. It's like over burning your eyes, and then almost like a wet dog, and then BO smell all smushed together, but the urine aspect being really strong.
Yeah,
I've heard that a number of times. That's very interesting. I would keep going back to that location if I were you, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a spot that I frequent quite often, but I just happened to veer off of where I normally traipse around in. And that's when I was like, I feel like I should go up this really tall hill. It had more view. I could see more area all at once. So as soon as I got to the top of the hill, I ran into it. It almost felt like maybe a barrier marking almost. And then when I hit that point, I felt like that rock clacking was almost warning any others in the area that I had went to that barrier edge.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it. The sound itself, I could see them doing as some kind of alarm, or like, hey, everybody pay attention. There's this chick's coming up here. We all need to get out. Like, there's some kind of signaling potentially there. But when you say marker, do you mean something like physically there, or do you just mean? I mean,
like other animals where they go around and they mark an area as kind of a claim. Maybe that urine smell was, I had hit sort of a barrier of an area that they had claimed, with like a repetitive urinating on that spot. And that's just what I assume, just based on animal behavior. Now, I know they're far beyond animal behavior a lot of times, but it was just very ironic how I walked into that smell, and then I started hearing the rock clacks.
That's interesting. Are you recording overnight there?
I am not. I don't have an LDR system set up. That's why I was really interested on watching your video, because if I can create my own, that's what I'm going to do. I did have a couple LDRs in the past, but I don't have those anymore. So I don't have the opportunity to do that right now. But I definitely think that that would be a beneficial area to do it in.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'd get one out there as soon as you can.
Yeah, 100%.
Wow.
Sorry, I just got my grandson. He's in the background, so I'm just gonna let him take over for a minute. Yeah, he's doing the moves.
That's great. Formations. Have you came across any possible formations? What are your thoughts on formations?
So here I'm from Michigan, and we have a lot of state land and national forest. And what I have noticed is that in the past 30 years, bushcraft has gotten very popular.
Yeah.
And makeshift hunting blinds, which are just basically TP lean-tos, have become extraordinarily popular as well.
Yep.
Because they're cheap and everything you need is right there. So I have found a lot of these structures that when you go and look at them, my take is they're human made.
Sure.
Because if you look in the leaf litter, there's like a seal to a 5-hour energy laying in the bottom of it.
Right.
You know.
Yep.
Or I'll find cut marks or gouge marks, or I'll find a place where a stool pushed 3 holes into the ground in the structure on the backside, almost like someone's like bow hunting behind it.
Right.
I find a lot like that. And then the larger things that you're like, oh, well, you know, inverted trees upside down. Something most people don't know is the inverted tree is 100% ancient logging mechanical activity. And the reason that they used to do this, and in some states they still do it, is when they clear cut an area back in the day, they didn't replant it very quickly. They would wait. And they would invert these trees and shove them in the ground so the root ball is sticking out like this. That was a created hawk perch. They created these so hawks could sit on them and eat the rodents that were going to chew down the returning forest that was going to regrow in the absence. So they put these in 99% of cases. They're inverted stumps so that the hawks and owls and things that are going to predate on the little critters that are chewing down and eating the seed pods of the old trees and the nuts, the squirrels coming in to feed on all this stuff, that the hawks and owls could really thin that population out and leave enough trees in that scape to recover faster. That was part of the implementation of these inverted trees in many cases. In many cases. Because they're quite common all throughout the Northwest. I've seen them out in the recorded in the Northeast. I've seen them in photographs coming from Canada, as well as in Alaska. In Alaska, the practice is still happening today. They still do that. And in many cases, they used to let the new guys train on the equipment by inverting the trees and putting them in the ground and stuff. Get a handle for the skids and the hooks and cranes and stuff. So there's some of that going on with that. So cool. I haven't seen anything structure-wise that I would go, that was them. I've seen some interesting branch weaving before, which I could not find a functional purpose to why a human would do it in an area that I would not think that a human would be there, let alone doing that there. I've seen like small little vine maples where they're twisted around each other and then tied off and looped and threaded through. Very unusual. I've got photographs of it from time to time, but yeah, I'm not convinced that most structures are something, but I've seen that, and that's interesting enough to photograph and again put in my mental filing cabinet back here. But
yeah, absolutely. I mean, those loop weavings, I guess you can say, those are kind of cool.
Yeah, I've seen it in cedar, and I've seen it in pine maple, and I've seen it in very young alder under 7 feet. can't quite make sense of it. It's definitely manipulated by hand. It's not a natural
Right.
wind lock situation or something. It's something doing it on purpose. I've seen that. And then lastly, I'll just cover the big structures. I'll call them the Todd standing structures, the big X's and TPs. Again, I'm not convinced that much of that is anything other than natural fall or snow load or mechanical manipulation in some cases, like on the edge of a clear cut. That could be mechanical manipulation. But I'm open to see stuff. I don't note anything that I haven't noted anything really particularly strong that I was like, oh yeah, there's Sasquatch tracks in this structure right below it.
Gotcha.
And we need to have one-to-one before we start spending too much time photographing hundreds of stick structures.
Yeah. Yep. I'm with you, buddy. Totally with you. Has it been almost 2 hours already?
Yeah. We got one more question.
Yeah.
And then we'll let you get back to your family there. It says, Nathan, what do you think about their ability to use infrasound to manipulate people or dogs?
So infrasound, so the nature of being a large mammal, a lot of large mammals, just by the nature of their vocal structure and the way they are built, infrasound is present in their vocalizations. Like elephants, you can think sea lions, you can think tigers. Large creatures with big tracheas and deep vocal cords that recede into a large chest cavity can produce infrasound. Some animals specifically can, I hate to use the word weaponize, but I can't think of a better term. I will say utilize infrasound as a stunning tool. Like tigers will roar at prey before they jump on it, and that roar kind of momentarily stuns the prey, and that's using infrasound as the primary feature to stun the prey. So it's totally possible that these things have infrasound, but I think a lot of people have built on that to a point that we're making a leap that we don't necessarily know is there, but they are a large mammal that could certainly be producing infrasound, and that infrasound could certainly be influencing our behavior. And a lot of the infrasound discussion points came from really old points made about being zapped or being stunned. Yeah. And what I am pretty convinced of is, you know how we talk about the sixth sense, I'm being watched, or I felt someone staring at me with bad intent and they were all creepy looking, or a cougar turned around and there's a cougar wide eyeing me over the ledge, you know, that kind of thing. I'm convinced that our brain, through our olfactory system, meaning we can't smell danger, right? But there are pheromones being put off by predators that we can't actually go, that smells like cougar, agitated cougar. Like, you know, we can't do that. But there is probably, because we see it in other animals, and what's notable is dogs have a very similar response to Sasquatches, it seems like, in this way, where they've never encountered a Sasquatch before, but their brain has an automatic shutdown when they seem to encounter these things. They like climb under your sleeping bag and piss in the tent. Whereas that dog was not afraid to chase a cougar or a bear just 2 months ago. Very unusual. So there's something to that. I wouldn't be surprised if these things put off a pheromone that puts our brain in an instantaneous shock. And we call it getting zapped. Most zapping encounters, for instance, in infrasound related encounters, occur when people are in their tent. They're laying down, they're sleeping, and they suddenly jolt awake and they feel like they can't move. It's almost like sleep paralysis. And then they feel like that they can barely breathe, and they feel an electrical charge over their body. They feel like the air is taken out of their lungs, and they're just frozen in shock. I would not be surprised if we find out down the road that is the animal is walking around the tent and pumping off, you know, cool, damp air sinking down by the tent under the rainfly. And these stress pheromones are being emitted by this Sasquatch because it's like stressed out, but it's like super excited that it's investigating a human camp. These pheromones are just sinking down with the cool, damp air and flowing up under the tent. You're laying there on your sleeping pad, totally unaware. You can't smell anything necessarily. And your body, you're just breathing in your sleep, inhaling these pheromones, and that part of the brain just lights up, and you startle awake, and your body has an automatic response to this kind of stuff. it may be one of those senses that we don't quite understand, that we're picking up through pheromones or something like that. That's I have a strong suspicion that's what's going on there, and that's part of one of those extra senses that we don't quite understand yet.
Yeah, interesting. It does make sense. Absolutely. Abe, do you have anything else?
You know, and there's the other thing too. I mean, I guess it's on exertion, sleep, and stuff like that. I think sometimes for what people are mistaken being blasted or zapped or whatever. I mean, for myself, last night I had a panic attack, and I'm laying down, and then out of nowhere, my heart just starts going doom, 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 doom. I'm like, what the heck's going on? And so then I drive to the nearest hospital, which is, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes away. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? Because I didn't hear any indication that there was a squatch around. I was just laying there, totally relaxed, listening to the frogs sound off during mating season. And out of nowhere, just boom, 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 boom. And come to find out, I'm going through a checklist. I was dehydrated. As soon as I got some electrolytes and some water inside of me, I felt a lot more better. And, you know, I also carry aspirin just in case too, sometimes, like bear aspirin. And I took one of those, and that helps as well. So I think a lot of times you got to kind of watch what you put your body through as well, because it might not always be possible infrasound. At least that's what I found out last night for me. And then also your caffeine consumption too could come into play too.
Staying up late, trying to stay up extra late, trying to see stuff, and then you go to bed, you got 450 milligrams of Monster Energy drink coursing through your veins, and you're laying there, and your body might go into a mode because of the abuse you've put it through. And also, let's just take into consideration, you live at your house or your job, your normal human four-wall environment like this one behind me. That's your normal. That's what
you're out of your comfort zone.
That's what you are in the most. And then you go out into a remote area with all new sense. Your senses are all cranked to 11. You are in a situation where there's novel smells, there's new sounds, and you've got this mindset that there could be an 800-pound primate walking around somewhere. And I was looking for it, and I may have tried to draw it in. So you're putting your body through all of these psychological ramps and stresses, and then you're cramming it into this sleep window where you're like, you're going to sleep in this alien environment after you just called in primates. Yeah, your brain is totally going to have normal dreams and responses to everything. Yeah, no, definitely not. Like you're putting yourself through some different pressures for sure.
Right.
And so the body can have abnormal, goofy responses to the environment and circumstances. So
that's some great points. Yeah, from both you and Abe. Those, great points. A lot of things that I don't think people really consider. You know, there are natural reasons for the way your body reacts sometimes.
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Not everything is Bigfoot, and that's one of the things that you always got to keep on the brain too.
Absolutely. Well, my dogs. Go ahead.
We should be seeking to be critical of our own experiences and our own evidence far faster than we are prone to assume that a Sasquatch is responsible.
Absolutely.
100%.
And that like is something the Bigfoot research community has a lot of work. If I'm just going to have tough love on it for a second, we really got to get more strict about what we assume is going on versus what we, are, to stop and take into account that human perception is not perfect. It's not great. And just because you see a pattern does not mean that pattern means what you want it to mean.
Yep.
It's about a careful and critical understanding and breakdown and logging of data. It's okay to hypothesize and operate on the idea, but once you go around declaring things like, oh, they do this and they do that, no, you'll notice that when I'm speaking about this kind of thing, I try to tell people the current data set seems to indicate, or the pattern we're seeing here suggests, or based on the model we're building right now. You'll hear a lot of framework like that. I think we need to be very careful about like prescribing that infrasound is a thing or that, you know, pick any one of these other attributes the community is assigned to Sasquatch. We need to be very careful about that. And we need to have very strong evidentiary thresholds before we just go around assuming something. Because otherwise, I recently covered this in a video, you end up chasing an awful lot of rabbit holes that don't go anywhere, and you waste a lot of time and a lot of years. I know guys that for 15 years were convinced these things were absolutely paranormal, and he tried to make forest friends with them and do all the things, you know. And there's a number of people with that belief. You're welcome to have it.
Yep.
But the reality of the situation is you run into the disparity problem. The disparity is you claim to have the secret knowledge and the secret relationship with these things, and the evidence you have is weaker than the evidence of the critical-minded, repetitious, scientific, data-gathering guys that aren't making these assumptions, that aren't making these drastic leaps. And those guys are getting better evidence than the people that are claiming to have this proximity to truth that the others don't.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that shows the cognitive gap, the disparity in the evidence for the claim of either side. And I think it's really important that people ruminate on that before they assume too many things in this time.
You're right. The discipline's just not there, brother. I agree with you.
And I really hope that kind of like message gets absorbed more so. I know we're trying with our channel over at Study Sasquatch. We're really trying to get people to stop and go, is this tree break a Bigfoot tree break? You know, I want people to go, no, it's the elk rut, and this tree is mangled, and if you look close enough, there's elk hair on it. Like, you know, get critical of what you find. Don't just, there it is, adult male left that. You know, you can't go that way.
Yeah.
And because you end up wasting a lot of time, and then the evidence you have to draw red circles around it all day long. And that's not good enough for anybody. It's not even good enough for you if you're really being honest. So
Oh my God.
That's great
Nathan,
advice.
just
Thank
really
you so
wanted
much,
to
man. These
mention
past 2
that.
weeks have been awesome.
Phenomenal. Just so much information, and it's all really good, solid information. So I appreciate you coming on. And I mean, we will always love to have you back on, because as you progress through your investigations, you're gonna just come up with all this new stuff, all this new audio, and I think that you are a veritable wealth of information. So I appreciate you coming on again.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
I just try to be right a little bit more than I'm wrong. That's kind of what I'm aiming for.
Just really want to encourage everybody who's watching this, do yourselves a favor. Go watch some real research at Study Sasquatch. You can find them on Facebook and on YouTube.
And subscribe to the Folds Mysteries for more podcasts, for more geeky, scientific, Bigfoot nerds and other people like that.
Yes, I love it.
There you go.
I love it. Thank you to everyone in chat. You guys were great tonight, and we'll see you well, actually, let me just throw this in. We probably won't see you next week, because next week I will be driving to Chicago. So see you in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
All right.
Watch on, everybody.